you need to prepare to work extremely hard for the next 5 to 10 years. So if you're a man watching this video, you understand that your biggest, the greatest asset that you have to society is your ability to produce and your ability to solve problems, right? That's what we're designed to do. That's our primary reason for being on Earth outside of reproduction, right? Is to survive, help humanity survive, right? Whether it's through innovation, like you see Elon Musk, and you have Jeff Bezos, you have Steve Jobs, or just through mere production, right? Could be as simple as driving goods to the grocery store, right? Driving, being a truck driver, right? Fixing things so that we have an enjoyable standard of living, right? If we're in a cold environment, right, and your heat goes out, you have someone, right, most times a man, who can come in and fix your AC or your your heating system in your house, right? So the whole premise behind what I'm talking to you guys about here is under the pretense that you understand that your biggest asset to not only yourself and the life that you can create, but to other human beings, is your ability to help them solve problems, right? So maybe you're a people person, right? You want to help people with their mind and their body and their health, right? Maybe that means you're studying fitness, right? It doesn't matter what form of service you bring to society. It just matters that you master something and you deliver it, and you deliver it consistently. So the idea I'm going to propose here in this video is that you should be working 60 to 80 hours a week for the next 5 to 10 years, right? So all of us have an extraordinary amount of energy if we're able to cultivate it, right? I talk a lot on this channel about maximizing your sleep, cutting out vices. And in my opinion, if you're able to get a hold on your vices, if you're not addicted to alcohol or drugs or anything, and you're not distracted, you don't have anything, going on in your life, maybe either you're single or you have a girlfriend that's, really supportive and really understands your role and, wants to be submitting to your authority and your leadership, right? Then there is absolutely no reason why right now as a guy, you can't be putting in 60 to 80 hours a week. So if that means picking up another job, then so be it. If that means while you're working your main job, you're studying to become something that you want to really do full time, then that's what it entails. But what I see a lot of guys doing, right, and this is not the way, right, that is going to help you become excellent and live a great life, is I see a lot of guys in their 20s, maybe even 30s, but mostly in their 20s, right? Like, and there's nothing wrong with living with your parents, but living with your parents under the assertion that there's a safety net for me, and I'm just working part-time before I figure things out. And that's really what you hear a lot too. Like, I'm just soul searching, I'm just trying to figure it out, I'm just trying to figure out my life. But at the same time, you hear these same people who say I'm trying to find myself, or I'm trying to figure it out. They're the same people that are smoking weed every day. They're the same ones who are watching porn. They're the same ones that are hanging out with the same loser friends that they had in high school, right? So what by default, I see is just a lack of, or a lack of sense of urgency, right? So there's no sense of urgency, right, amongst, guys who are living at home in their mid-20s, late 20s, even early 30s, right, who are just working part-time. They're not really, they're employed, right? But they're not really getting after it. They're not really trying to advance. They're not really trying to put themselves in a position to take care of themselves, and then also possibly take care of a girlfriend, wife, and then obviously a family later on. But the idea is that you need to get in the driver's seat of your life. And by default, when you're working extremely hard, consistently for a long period of time with, like I said, either that's working 2 jobs and investing that money into, your stocks or whatever, or saving up for a property, or you're, working on the side as someone who's, pursuing something else that's going to give them a high income skill. That's really the ideal situation, right? Because your job is to deliver value to other human beings. That's what we're here to do, and that's what gives us the biggest sense of purpose, right? A lot of guys who say that they're depressed, right, they're depressed because they're not out achieving anything, right? When you don't have anything going for you, or there's nothing to look forward to, right? That is what gives you that feeling of depression, and that feeling that life is meaningless, that life has no purpose, life has nothing to offer. It's just a random sum game, and we're just here to, get by, essentially, right? That's really what I think personally depression comes down to. You're just not working hard enough, right? And that's not to say that working hard is the antidote to solving all of your problems, but it's definitely the antidote to feeling sad, to feeling worried, to feeling fearful most of the time. Now, obviously, you'll still have doubt, you'll still have fear, you'll still have these things pop up, but I would argue that someone who's achieving things consistently and moving towards their goals, right? But as a result of them working hard, I would argue that that person has less doubt, less fear, and less anxiety than the person who's just idly, sitting around playing video games all day. And, I can really resonate with this a lot because during COVID, right? And, I played video games throughout high school and everything, just like every other, teenage boy. But during COVID, right, like when everyone was locked down, that was a time where I was playing a lot of video games. I was really playing a lot of Halo. I was playing, pretty much from the time I woke up, like 11 a.m. to, nighttime, right? 12 a.m., 1 a.m. And the issue with that was, obviously everything was locked down. So it's hard to kind of get out and, work. But the problem with that is, like every time I'd play, because I was like 20, 21, I just felt this sense that like, damn, like this is not what I should be doing. Like I'm wasting a lot of time. And I felt down during those years, right? Like I was staying up super late, I was waking up super late, not really working out, and just that sort of everyday existence was starting to build up. And I obviously felt the depression. I felt the just lack of meaning, the lack of purpose, and it felt empty. It felt just like empty achievements, right? Like, yeah, I'm doing great. I'm, leveling up and, beating all these teams or whatnot. But at the end of the day, like it doesn't translate into real life. And I knew, obviously in the back of my mind, like, hey, at some point I got to get my shit together, because this lifestyle is just not going to cut it. And it's just wasting a lot of time. So nothing against video games, right? But that's the whole point. Like, it's hard because, especially, like as it relates to, I think a lot of us, one of the things that we struggle with the most is like women, right? Because a lot of us want like girlfriends. A lot of us, we have, when you're young as a guy, your sex drive is through the freaking roof, right? So you have all these hormones, going all over the place, and you're just, you look at a girl and you freaking get super excited, right? If she's attractive, right? So it can sort of really, it can sort of feel like, damn, like, like I'm missing out. And then, or also, you can get addicted to like pornography, because you need to find a way to pacify your emotions and your just your energy, right? Because it's when you're young and you have high testosterone, right? Like you can feel at times like you're about to explode. Like it really can feel like that, right? If you're taking care of yourself, if you're getting enough sleep, right? So the idea behind you working a lot, the idea behind you, studying or doing whatever you're doing to just deliver service to the world, right? The whole idea behind that is so that you transmute your energy into something productive that actually has a return on investment, i.e. money, right? So it's hard work, right? Obviously, like it's easier to, open up your phone and open up, pornography or whatever to just get a quick release. But at the end of the day, like once you get to a certain age, right? I'm 25, right? So, a lot of you guys in your late teens, early 20s who struggle with video games or addictions, right? Eventually, guys, like that shit, you got to stop, right? Because things, as life progresses, as you get older, right? Time's ticking, and you don't want to be personally, in your early 30s and mid 30s and look back at the past, 10 years or 15 years and be like, damn, like I had literally the most amount of energy, the most amount of time, right? To really devote myself to whatever I want to master and achieve. And instead of doing that, instead of dedicating myself to that, or instead of, you know, working hard, you know, maybe picking up another job and, you know, learning how to invest and building wealth, instead of doing all of that, I just squandered my time and, you know, just worked like part-time, lived at home, and just kind of was in like cruise control, right? And, you know, obviously there's always time to rebound, but at the end of the day, guys, like, you know, cutting vices never gets easier, right? Working hard never becomes easier. So I think it's best to bite the bullet now, especially if you guys are young, right? And start to work really hard now, right? And here's the thing, you know, a lot of times, let's talk about vices real quick. A lot of times, you know, vices are seen as something we need to overcome. We need to quit. We need to like deal with the temptation, deal with the urges, right? If you guys are familiar with like the NoFap community and whatnot. But here's the thing, a lot of the vices that you have, like if it's weed, if it's porn, video games, if it's food, a lot of that just stems from what? Inactivity, right? Let's use the 80-20 rule. 80% of the problem that you face when it comes to your vices, 80% of that is just having too much free time, right? If you cut all your free time, right, and you're at work or you're studying or you're on the computer working on something, or you're out and about at your job, at your second job, or, you know, just you're filling your time with productive things that have a return on investment, that by default kills 80% of the problem, right? Because 80% of the problem is that you have too much free time, is that you're just not doing anything with the time that you have in your life. So obviously there's other things that contribute to an addiction, right? I'm not saying it's like you can just, you know, distract yourself with work all the time and just, you know, cut vices, but for the most part, like, that's really what it comes down to, right? And if you're working out, if you're working super hard, if you're studying, if you're using your mind, if you're exuding every aspect of the potential that you have within your human physical makeup, right, on a consistent daily basis, right, I can guarantee you won't have that much of a problem with, you know, pornography or drugs or anything along those lines, because as you're progressing in your life, right, by putting in the work, by, you know, advancing, right, you're going to start to see your results, right? And achieving those results, right, gives you satisfaction. It gives you joy. It gives you, you know, those less cheaper forms of dopamine per se, right? Like you get those are what's called good dopamines, right? The dopamine you feel from you know, a workout, right? Or the dopamine you get from closing a sale or seeing a big paycheck, or whatever it is, like, so, or getting a promotion or getting a raise, like, you know, so these things sort of are what is supposed to give us joy in life, right? So yeah, I think all of us have the time. It's just like, you know, and here's another thing as it relates to like living at home, because I've made a lot of videos on living at home. I don't think living at home's bad, right? Like, because, you know, I've also asserted the point on how like living at home can help you build wealth quicker. But here's the thing, right? Everything is subjective to you, right? So if you're the type of person who can work hard at home and sort of not get lazy and, you know, have all this motivation and drive while still living at home, right? And, you know, if your household is pretty quiet and your parents don't bother you that much, and, you know, you just don't have a lot of noise around, then, you know, if that can work for you, then great, right? But for the most part, I think a lot of guys who live at home, right, it kind of kills their sense of urgency, right? Because like I said, if you know that you have that backup plan, you have that safety net, which is your parents, then, you know, you sort of, you're like, yeah, I can try again tomorrow, or yeah, I can go another day addicted to this drug or addicted to this vice. So it doesn't give you the sense of urgency to sort of get your shit together. And that can, all that does is just prolong your success. All that does is just waste time, and all that does is just make it that much harder and make it take that much longer for you to become successful, and for you to start to, you know, maybe get your own place, get yourself a nice girlfriend, maybe you meet a girl, right? Like, so, you know, I'm not saying you have to rush the process, but I want you guys to achieve some level of sustainability and independence at a relatively young age. I don't want fucking guys living with their parents in their 30s and in their mid 30s. Like, that's ridiculous, right? Obviously, you know, sometimes you have to do what you have to do, but for the most part, you know, I want you guys to be on your way to not only, you know, living on your own, and possibly taking care of a family, and just being the leader that you're supposed to be. But I want you guys to also get to a point where you could possibly retire in your mid 30s or 40s or whatever, so this is sort of like this message is sort of not just to obviously become like just a well-rounded man, like, and just like a valuable contributor to society, but also to be extraordinary, to be excellent. I don't want average guys walking around, right? Like, I want you guys to be the best possible versions of yourself you can be, as far as your income and as far as the ability for you to deliver the value that you can deliver if you, again, dedicate yourself, put in the work, and at the same time also cut the things out that are hurting your ability to do so. So yeah, it takes a while, right? Like, I think a lot of us, a lot of guys, you just see all the people who become successful, guys especially, like, it takes time, right? I think the 20s aren't, like, I feel like for a lot of us, obviously there's some exceptions, but I think for a lot of us, like, we might not see the great results that we want to see in our 20s, but right, like, those years, once you see the results in your early 30s or mid 30s or whatever, right, where you really start to hit your apex, that obviously can be attributed to the 5 to 10 years that you dedicated to really not seeing any results, but still putting your head down, still showing up every day, still being consistent, still doing what you need to do, whether you feel like it or not. And obviously at the same time, going through the struggle, going through the hurdles, going through the not knowing how to do what you need to do, right? Learning, not, fucking up, maybe losing money, right? Maybe going through some adversity, maybe someone else gets a raise or a promotion and you get passed up, but then you bounce back and you're able to rise up after that, right? So the adversity and the struggle and the potential loss you face, right, is obviously there, but your ability to bounce back, right, by being consistent and by not willing to give up and just having that grit, right, is what's going to be the byproduct of the success that other people see when you're in your early 30s or mid 30s or 40s, right? So yeah, this is just to inspire you guys to obviously continue to work hard if you're already on that path, and continue to do the things that most people aren't willing to do, but also to just remember also that it will take its time. It will take obviously loss, it'll take fucking up, it'll take being overlooked, it'll take setbacks, it'll take possibly feeling like you step back a little bit. All of these things are what the journey entails. So I want you guys to be aware of these things, and when they come, if you lose your money, right, if you're trading or you're doing something and you lose money, which I have, or if you get overlooked at work, or just there's many countless things that you can go through as someone who's rising up in the world, that feels like damn, like I'm not really advancing, and it feels like you're stuck. But just realize, right, like, if you keep showing up and if you put your head down and you still have the vision to become successful and become whatever you're destined to become, right? And obviously you don't know that, you can't know that, right? You just have to be present and can take action where you are, but you will become what you need to become, right? So anyways, guys, that's it. That's all. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. If you're new to my channel, make sure to subscribe. If you guys have any questions, comments, feel free to leave them down below. And as always, I will talk to you guys soon. Peace.